Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bhakti Fundamentals. We are back today to introduce our inner hierarchy with a special emphasis on the mind and about how it can work for or against us. Every year as the Christmas season approaches, we get bombarded with dazzling advertisements and not so subtle pressures urging us to indulge, buy more, eat more, enjoy more. For someone striving to live a spiritual life, especially on the path of Bhakti Yoga, this can become a test of our ability to control our lower faculties, such as our mind and senses. According to the Bhagavad-gītā, our real identity lies beyond matter. From the body emerge our senses, which report back to our mind. The intelligence situated above the mind is meant to discern what is truly beneficial and what is harmful for us. However, when our intelligence is not guided by spiritual knowledge, it can easily become materially misled. As a result, everything below it, mind, senses, and body, follows in that material direction and comes under the influence of material nature. This means we begin to think and act materially, which is not in our actual best interest, rather than living and choosing spiritually, which is always in our best interest. Our body and senses are composed of gross matter. Our mind and intelligence are made of subtle matter. All of them are simply tools we use to function in this world, but they are not who we are. All along, we are the Atma, the eternal soul, the conscious witness who is higher than all of these temporary material coverings. Krishna, the Supreme, clearly outlines this inner hierarchy in Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 3, verse 42. He says the working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. This means that when our mind or senses are pulled in various directions by advertising, impulsive desires, sudden mood swings, we must rise to the platform of higher intelligence, guided by spiritual knowledge. That means remembering who we truly are, the soul, discerning what is in our spiritual best interest, and acting in alignment with our eternal spiritual well-being. Of course, this is easier said than done. Nevertheless, this is the way to spiritual success. In the Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 2, verse 58, Krishna says, "One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs within the shell, is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness." In his purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the test of a yogi, devotee, or self-realized soul is that they are able to control the senses according to their plan. Most people, however, are servants of the senses and are thus directed by the dictation of the senses. That is the answer to the question as to how the yogi is situated. The senses are compared to venomous serpents. They want to act very loosely and without restriction. The yogi or the devotee must be very strong to control the serpents, like a snake charmer. He never allows them to act independently. The senses of the Krishna conscious persons are used only for some particular purpose in the service of the Lord, and are withdrawn otherwise. Arjuna is being taught here to use his senses for the service of the Lord, instead of for his own satisfaction. Keeping the senses always in the service of the Lord is the example set by the analogy of the tortoise who keeps the senses within. Without spiritual life, our senses will naturally be drawn to material sense objects, whatever happens to please our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, guided by the modes of material nature that are most active in our lives at a given time. But when we begin practicing Bhakti Yoga, we learn to redirect the senses in the service of Krishna. Artificially suppressing or denying our senses doesn't work and is not recommended by Krishna. Instead, we spiritualize our senses by engaging them in Krishna's service. Through this redirection, our senses gradually become purified, and we begin to find joy in spiritual sights, fragrances, sounds, tastes, and touches, all connected to Krishna. The fragrance of incense offered to Krishna, the taste of sanctified food, prasadam, the sound of Krishna's holy names chanted in japa and kirtan, the sight of Krishna's beautiful deity form. The very same senses that once pulled us outward towards matter now draw us closer to Krishna. But for this spiritualization of our senses to happen successfully, we must bring both the mind and the intelligence, which are higher than our body and senses, under spiritual guidance. When our intelligence is informed by scriptural knowledge and our mind is gradually purified through devotional practices, then our entire being becomes harmonized in loving service to the Lord. When it comes specifically to the mind, Krishna, the Supreme Himself, openly acknowledges just how difficult it is to control the mind without spiritual life or regular spiritual practice to fortify us. Arjuna, his student and devotee, openly admits this challenge as well. In Bhagavad-gītā, chapter 6, verse 34, Arjuna declares, "The mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate, and very strong, O Krishna, and to subdue it, I think, is more difficult than controlling the wind." In the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada writes, "The mind is so strong and obstinate that it sometimes overcomes the intelligence, although the mind is supposed to be subservient to the intelligence." For a person in the practical world who has to fight so many opposing elements, it is certainly very difficult to control the mind. So what can be done? This sounds a little pessimistic, but Krishna actually gives us the spiritual solution in the very next verse. He encourages us by explaining in verse 35 of chapter 6, "O mighty-armed son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind. But it is possible by suitable practice and by detachment." The suitable practice to which he refers is our spiritual sadhana, hearing about Krishna, chanting the Maha Mantra, which is comprised of the names of the Supreme, associating with like-minded spiritualists, etc. And vairagya, or detachment from matter, grows naturally when we experience a higher spiritual taste, param drishtva nivartate. Srila Prabhupada writes in his purport to this important verse on the mind, "By the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind in spirit." Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. Thus, Bhakti Yoga provides the practical means to calm our restless mind, guide our intelligence, and enable us to control our senses. It is the remedial process, the spiritual treatment plan for regaining mastery over our senses and mind. So we can begin to see how the mind can act as our greatest enemy when it drags us down into material desires, or as our best friend when it begins to support our spiritual life and generate spiritual ideas and thoughts. Everything hinges on whether the mind is controlled and directed spiritually. Krishna directly states this in the Gita in chapter 6, verse 6. He says, "For him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will remain the greatest enemy." If we don't want to live as servants to a restless, whimsical mind, we must learn to distinguish our mind from our real self, the soul. Our fleeting thoughts and emotions are not the deepest truth and reality. We are the Atma, the eternal conscious witness, the observer of thoughts, emotions, desires, and even of our mind itself. People may understand that they're not the body, but fewer realize that they're not the mind either. Learning to make this distinction is essential for genuine spiritual progress. Our senses and minds may chase after the latest gadget, or a house beyond our means, or the fleeting approval of others, but we, the soul, are searching for something much deeper. Our true nature is to love and serve the Supreme, Krishna, to uncover our eternal relationship with Him. That is our eternal function, our Sanatan Dharma, and only by fulfilling that purpose will we experience lasting happiness. As George Harrison writes in his foreword to Krishna book, everyone is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. The path of Bhakti Yoga not only reconnects us with that eternal function of the soul for all of us, but also equips us with the spiritual knowledge to distinguish our body and our restless mind from our real identity, the self or the soul. And once we can make that distinction, we gain the ability to choose wisely in life, not just according to temporary short-term interest, prayas, but in line with our highest long-term spiritual benefit, shreyas. During times like Christmas, when the atmosphere is thick with material distractions for our senses and mind, it's especially important to remember our true spiritual position. We are not our body, nor even our mind or intelligence. These are simply tools we use while navigating life in this material world. At our core, we are the soul, higher than our senses, mind, and intelligence. By recalling this inner hierarchy, we begin to understand that our mind and senses are meant to be guided by us, the soul, not blindly obeyed. When we cultivate spiritual knowledge, our mind may even begin to produce spiritual thoughts, and our senses may naturally become drawn to spiritual sights and sounds and fragrances, etc. Thus, our mind and senses can be our friends in spiritual life when spiritually guided. And when our mind is not acting as our friend and is attempting to distract us from spiritual life, we'll have the clarity to recognize it, the fruit of spiritual knowledge is the ability to discern between spirit and matter. The more we live from this elevated spiritual awareness, the more peaceful and genuinely fulfilled our lives become. So rather than being swept up in material consumption during this season, let's take the opportunity to grow spiritually by deepening our connection with the Supreme Person, Krishna. Spiritual connection over material consumption. So that's all we have for today on the topic of our inner hierarchy, and particularly the mind. This session was just introductory, and we can go into more detail in future ones. Please let us know your thoughts or leave us a comment below, and send in any questions you have that we might answer in future sessions. In the meantime, thank you for listening today, and we'll see you next time on Bhakti Fundamentals.